Good morning.
Good morning. Hi. Hello. Hi, I'm Rabbi Karen Fox. I don't know if I know some of you. I'm Rabbi Emerita at Wilshire Boulevard Temple and used to do Torah study in real life for many years. Um, so I'm glad to be here, and I can see as you put on your screen that most of you are there, and I guess you're regulars, right? Great. Great. And I will follow the pattern that I've talked about with Stanley. And if it's not to your taste, you'll tell me. So we're together. I'd like to begin with a bracha for beginning Torah study and say it with the intention as well for healing. So those who are in need of strength and healing are strengthened by our study together. So we begin Baruch Atah Adonai
Adonai,
Eloheinu
Eloheinu
melech
melech
haolam
haolam,
asher
asher
tzivanu
kitshanu b'mitzvotav,
b'mitzvotav tzivanu
v'tzivanu
la'asok
la'asok b'divrei
b'divrei Torah. Amen. And may we soak into words of Torah. So it is great. I can see some of you. I can't see everybody, but I imagine as you speak, I'll see more of you. We are at Parsha Trua, which is it has a number of unique items. That is, it is called Shabbat Shekalim. It is also Rosh Chodesh Adar, and it is Parshat Truma. If you are in the green Ashkenazi Weiss commentary, we'll be on 452. If you are in the blue Plout commentary, page 543, but we'll really start at the beginning of the Parsha, which is Exodus 25. And Shvat Shekalim is one of the key four Shabbatot before Pesach, which means we're already counting. Even though we haven't quite reached Purim yet, we're on our way to liberation. It is also Rosh Chodesh Adar, the holiday in which we mark Purim, and really may we enter with hope of joy that we would experience in Adar, even though the news and our world is pretty outrageous and chaotic. We still hope for experiencing joy in the month of Adar. So this parsha is really focused on the building of the portable tabernacle, the Mishkan, and it was a spiritual center for the Israelites in the desert. This is pretty elaborate description of what this holy site will be, furnishings, clothing, and ritual objects, um, and many things that may not have been found in the desert. But we're not going to really focus on that. I'm more interested in what is the Mishkan in terms of its impact. What is it for the people? What does it mean in its language? What does it mean in terms of who is the Mishkan made for? So let's begin if we can. If any of you have, if you're in the green uh, commentary, one of the things I love about the women's commentary is the outline in front of each of the parshiot, and that is it focuses here on the instructions, the building materials, the interior, the instructions of the tabernacle, but I actually would like us to begin with reading at the beginning of Exodus 25:1. Do you have somebody read and volunteer? Okay, Suzanne, I see you. Suzanne Gambias. You don't? Do you read the text out loud? Okay. So Natalie, why don't you read it? Unmute, please.
Here we go.
Terrific.
I'm sorry. Now they have it on the bottom. Wait a minute. Here it's at the top here. Okay, where do we go?
We're hearing you very nicely.
You can hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Tell the Israelite people to bring me gifts. You shall accept gifts for me from every person whose heart so moves him. And these are the gifts that you shall accept from them: gold, silver, copper, blue, purple, and crimson yarns, fine linens, goat's hair, tanned ram skins, dolphin skins, and acacia wood, oil for lighting, spices for the anointing oil, and for the aromatic incense, lapis lazuli, and other stones for setting, for the ephod and for the breastpiece. And let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them, exactly as I show you, the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furnishing. So shall you make it."
Thank you. Thank you. So we've got here a very good fundraiser for the sanctuary, right? All these really elaborate things that people are going to give voluntarily, but there's one sentence that stands out that is different from the others. It's not instruction. And when we get to 25:8, and let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them, there's some discussion about what this actually means. And there's a problem. The problem is really with the last word in that sentence, Asu li mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. Make for me a sanctuary, a mikdash, without a lot of definition as to what mikdash means quite. V'shachanti b'tocham, and I will dwell. And the question is, will I dwell in it, the sanctuary, or will I dwell in them, the people? And that becomes really a question for us. So if we look down on the same page at the commentary at the bottom of the page where it says 8, if you look to Mishkan, and Mikdash comes from the word holy, from Kadosh. So it's a holy space. The holy space does not seem to have a location. I may dwell among them. That's a debate. And so, would somebody read the next? What dwell means. Somebody else want to read, please, in the commentary on page 454?
5-4.
If you'd like to read it, I can't see everybody, so unmute. Take it away. So basically, I can't see you, so this is, it's not quite big enough here. Of the people, Howard Weisberg, would you like to read that?
Starting with 8.
On page 454, at the very bottom of the left column on the page, that I may dwell among them.
Oh, the commentary? I don't have the commentary.
I'll read
In
it.
the women's commentary.
Oh.
Okay,
I don't have that.
I'll read
okay,
it.
Suzanne, you know where we are?
Yes, I do. I have it.
Grab it.
Okay. That I may dwell among them. This key statement articulates the purpose of the tabernacle. Dwell. The verb comes from the root shikun.
Shin Kuf Nun.
The usual word for dwell means to enable or live someplace, in contrast to the root shikin. Okay.
Top of the column.
Indicates a moving dynamic presence, not one tied to a fixed location. The latter concept of the
Shekhinah.
Shikanu comes from the same root. See the interpretations 468.
Thank you. So if we just stick with that for a moment, the commentator is trying to tell us that if we were really saying that it was going to be dwelling, we would use Yoshev. Shavti, I lived there, I sat there, I dwelled there. But this is saying it comes from the root Shin Kuf Nun, because it's a different kind of presence. The presence meaning one that is a dynamic spiritual presence and not linked to a fixed location. Is that how we think of the Mishkan and the dwelling in the Mishkan? And the question is that it's seen as a movable ark? And Eric, I see a question. You have your hand up.
This reminds me of the line in the movie Field of Dreams. If they built it, you would come. So they're building something to welcome God into their lives. And it's like having a good piece of real estate, so they'd be able to go with all furnished for them as turnkey. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting commentary because it is really the question, if they build it, do people actually come? And sometimes that is the case. Here, they're saying, particular as they're moving in the desert, they want to have some kind of holy space where people can come together, where the desert life is so variable. Maybe the Shmikhan is something in bringing the community together that in itself has a holy aspect. I see, thank you, Eric. Mara, I see you have your hand up.
I have a question on the word itself. The end of the word, the Hebrew word "t." So
Which Hebrew word?
the shachanti.
Shachanti, yes.
So the suffix at the end, does that tell us something? Does that give us some insight in terms of how we should read this?
What do you think?
Oh, yes, but I'm not sure what it is.
Okay, so it's grammatically singular, past tense, shachanti, v'takam, but because it has a vav before it, it can make it present and future. So it is, and I will dwell in them. And that gives it an indication that it's God saying, I will actually dwell. And the question is then in the grammar of the next word, because you're on to something there. Betocham raises a grammatical problem also. So it can either be, and I will dwell betocham, among them, the people, or betocham, inside them. So the question is really, where's God? Thank you. Steve Miller, I see your hand.
There seems to be a tension in what you're saying, because if this ark or whatever we're building is a central location for people to come to, that would indicate that that's where God was, whereas he's in their midst and moving among the people. Then for the ark to be the central location, it needs to be something other than or more than where you find God.
So I think you raise an issue that's quite contemporary. It is, where do people find God's presence? Where is the spiritual presence? And if you ask people, many people will say, well, why do you go to synagogue? I go to sit next to my friend. Is that a spiritual comment? Well, sometimes the sense of being in community provides spirituality. But this text is saying God's presence can be found inside the people, but perhaps there's demand for community to experience it. That if we are together in this Mishkan, we're not all separate in the desert and lonely, but somehow in the merging of people to a common spot, there can be an experience of spirituality, I think, that I feel when I come into a synagogue and I hear a prayer sung in community. That gives me a greater resonance to God's presence than if I am alone, unless, sometimes I like to walk alone and have my own conversation with God. But I think here there's a purpose in the writing. Shachanti b'tocham, I will live in them, and I will also be with them wherever they go. And when I am together with them in that community, maybe they feel it more. And maybe there's more depth to the spiritual experience. Let's read the commentary on page 454 because it addresses this point. It's the one for among them. Somebody want to raise your hand? All right. Well, then I'll read it. Among them, or in the midst of the people, such language helps negotiate the tension between the freedom of God to be everywhere and the need of humans to have tangible evidence of God's immanence and accessibility. So it raises the question for me, and maybe for you, does God need a home? Susanna.
Does God need a home? I think God has a home. I think God's home is everywhere. There is no specific address that we can find God. If we search hard enough, we can find God every place.
Thank you. Yes.
I have the Eitz Chaim book. You should realize that we all are using different books. So when you ask us to turn to a particular page and look at a particular note, that doesn't work because some of us are using Eitz Chaim, some are using the women's commentary, etc. So, but let me read what's in Eitz Chaim about this.
Please.
It says, the literal meaning of Shachan is to rest, not to dwell. The sanctuary is not meant to be taken literally as God's abode. God dwells in heaven. The sanctuary makes tangible the concept of the indwelling of the divine presence. God's immanence in the camp of Israel, a presence to which the people may direct their hearts and minds. So it's not a question of dwelling, it's a question of resting. And this idea of an imminent God amongst our midst.
So that is a very powerful text. And it's saying, where Suzanne said God is everywhere. And what this text is asserting is that God is inside. God is an immanent element in each human being. Not everybody recognizes that, but that's the text itself is responding that. And I do know that people are using different Torah commentaries. I now want to go, I see one more hand, and then we're going to go a little bit to the Plout. And next time I do this, I'll look in Mishkan, the whatever, the conservative one as well, Eitz Chaim. So, Rebecca, I see your hand.
Yes, I think that sometimes we have to look at this in the context of when it was written. And I say that because I've been thinking a lot lately, and I mentioned this yesterday in the Friday Torah study about the influence of the Egyptians on the Jews at the time, and that the Jews were so used to looking at idols and watching and perhaps even themselves praying to these idols, that it was necessary for them to have a physical object in order to realize the presence of God.
So I think that's a very powerful statement, because part of Jewish response to other religion is sometimes to say we don't have an idol, but we have a place. But that place can be every place, even with the pun on a name for God, which is makom. Makom, which means place, also means God. So we can have that makom within our soul and can experience it. And the whole question of the historicity is a very important piece. And part of it is Jewish response to what was Egyptian and Assyrian religion. So great. Thank you. So some of you may also have the Plaut commentary. And I looked there as well to see, so what does Plaut say about this? And if you go to page 544 in the Plaut commentary, he's looking at history in many ways. And he says this mikdash that was built in the desert is something that was referred to when the temple was built much later in Jerusalem as Beit HaMikdash. Again, that place that holds the holiness. And on page 544, there's actually a rather elaborate graphic giving us the picture of what it is that the Mishkan might have looked like. But in that we don't have photography and we don't have archaeological evidence of the Mishkan, this becomes a little problematic. It's based on the design, the measurements, the words, as people try to sketch out what it is that this Mishkan actually looks like. On page 553 in the Plaut, again, I want to refer to something that one of my teachers at Hebrew Union College in New York had emphasized, and that is Harry Orlinsky. He was one of the commentators and the translators of the JPS Torah and the whole Tanakh, and taught Bible for many years. So the question is about history of this thing, right? So many scholars consider the account of the Mishkan as fictitious. A retrojection of the temple was already built. This Torah section was introduced to give the sanctuary a legitimacy in the days of wandering in the desert. So then Orlinsky says about all of the instructions regarding the Mishkan. There can be little doubt that these institutions are a perfect product of nomadic society, even if later priestly writers embellished the original account considerably. Acacia wood, cedar, cypress, or olive was later used in Canaan. Ramses lambskins, cloth of goat's hair are all part of nomadic existence. Again, while there's little known about many aspects of life about nomads in antiquity, they left virtually no records. We know that some nomadic pre-Mohammedan Arabs had portable shrines. So in terms of the reference to Egypt, this would be also other pre-Mohammedan Arabs had portable shrines, which might have given us an idea maybe we should have a portable tabernacle. So what follows is essentially an old tradition stemming from wilderness days, describing the beginnings of Israelites' centralized cult, to which were added details that reflected later conditions. And some of the problems are like, where did they get that lapis lazuli? That's a really a blue stone not found in the desert. So part of the question that scholars have is, what was the function of this Mishkan? Did it really exist, and to what degree did it exist? Do you think people gathered at a portable sanctuary? And what was the purpose? Steve Miller, I see you thinking.
Just thinking.
Somebody else, do you think they gathered in a portable sanctuary in this Mara?
To be a community, to share or understand religious beliefs takes a community. And so for me, the purpose of the Mishkan is to begin to create a community that in sharing beliefs, in sharing divinity, grows to embody those beliefs and thus become sanctuaries individually.
Does that work for you?
It works. It works for me when I go to Friday night services. I have both the space to commune with God and the ability to be part of a community that ostensibly has come to do the same thing, and thus we all become a community in our similar beliefs and our desire to be of community.
Thank you.
Within those beliefs.
Thank you. Steve Miller, I see your hand now.
Now, I use the Schottenstein edition because I like the interlinear, and it has a comment from Sforno, which talks about how this container with the cherubim looking down, and it notes that God rests there, but it's all to show that Israel's focus is always upon the Torah, so that it's really not a question of where is God, but how we're being directed toward these teachings and commandments.
Aha. So it's not the grand spiritual, is how do we take it in our life? if the Torah gives us direction for daily life, for interaction in business, for concern about a moral center. So that is how you see the look towards the Torah. That's for
At least Sforno thinks that.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you. Brad, I see your hand.
Yeah, Rabbi, I'm thinking about God's immanence as they're wandering in the desert, it being in that cloud and fire that follow the Israeli people. So God is already immanent with them as they're wandering. So I'm wondering if this isn't looking forward to a time when they're no longer in a wandering mode, and then that immanence is internalized and no longer in the cloud and in the fire.
Interesting. At the end of Aleinu, we say, Bayom hahu Adonai echad, yeh Adonai echad. That here we're asking to, make it known, God. Let's see you in the real world. We're wanting that experience. Yeah, I think that is. And sometimes, I go to synagogue these days, like you do as a congregant, and I'm wanting a quiet spiritual moment. Sometimes just the gathering of people together works, but sometimes it's too noisy. It just is too much. And what does it take to have that sense of God's presence? Ray Kosaran, I see your hand. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you. And thank you for this interesting question. I hear it as an invitation to speculate rather than an invitation to go with forensic evidence, which I suspect we don't actually have. So and I find that an interesting question. So for me to speculate, did the Mishkan exist? Something that seems plausible and interesting to me is that I suspect it did not exist in the way that the text implies that it existed, that it was ever present and traveled with the community and was always there and was always a part of their ritual. But the way messaging, to use a contemporary term, evolves around positions that we wish to advance, and I unapologetically believe Torah, the work of human beings, however divinely inspired. I will postulate that in some form the Mishkan sometimes existed, but that the redactors and authors are perhaps extrapolating from some anecdotal evidence or piecemeal evidence that sometimes this practice or something like it was observed, and more universally applying it to a neater and more helpful narrative to contextualize the development of their relationship with God. So I think that's a plausible explanation for how we might think about whether or not it existed.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm a former camp director quite a number of years ago, but when we took the kids out of camp, we created a mishkan, if you will. If we would be away on Shabbat, we would create kind of a chuppah, put the Torah underneath it, gather the kids around it, and that became a portable sanctuary, if you will, so that we could gather as a community, face east, but it was clearly temporary. And I think that sense of when you're on the move, how much do you need to come together as a community to acknowledge a central value, which might be that sense of we heard God's voice and we're moving forward. Eric Weiss, I see your hand.
I do a lot of Torah classes today. The first one was my home synagogue of Central. we have a program on Saturday mornings. It's called the Mishkan. So we have an opportunity during this. We have a regular service. Instead of a sermon, we do a study session or a particular Torah class. So it's like a way of introducing the Torah to people, try to demystify it. So that's called the Mishkan, which is on Saturday mornings on Zoom. So isn't that something? So I realize the Mishkan is a way of welcoming the people to share in the study of Torah.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's interesting, when last I taught Chevra Torah or Torah study, it was at Temple, at, Wilshire Boulevard Temple at the Temple campus. And there was a steady community there of over 25 years. Started when I started the temple at 1985, when Rabbi Field said, let's do Torah study. And it has morphed into an experience of different kinds of Torah studies in the temple, Friday, and then here online, really, I think because of pandemic. And it has created a different kind of Mishkan. So, yeah, very cool. And in going with that, Malbim, who is, I think, a 13th century commentator.
Rabbi, Marina had her hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry, Marina. Yes. Oh, wait, just 1 second. I have to take, sorry, Benji. Hi, I'm teaching a Torah study and Dad is in shul. Call on his phone. Okay, good. I'll tell him you called. My grandkids are calling for my husband's birthday. Thank you. Love you, Benji. Bye. They're in Vienna. Sorry.
Happy birthday to your
Marina.
Happy birthday to your husband.
Oh,
I don't know.
Thank you.
Hear me? Yeah. I wanted to ask if the community is wandering in the desert, how can they mold cherubs of gold?
I think that's where Orlinsky's comment comes in really well. Historically, they couldn't mold out of gold. They couldn't find lapis lazuli. They couldn't find certain kinds of the cedar wood because that takes water, other kinds of things. So what they're saying is there may have been this experience of Mishkana, of a traveling spatial spiritual center, but it didn't have the elaborate
decorations,
art and architecture that we might find in later in the temple in Jerusalem or the temple that is Wilshire Boulevard Temple or Stephen Wise or Beth Am, whatever it is, sort of a looking at the text and editing in at a later point. Because the Torah as we have it, if we're non-Orthodox, we see that the Torah is an edited document over time, and that at different layers have added different elements to it. And certainly this desire to make the Mishkan beautiful, artistic, rich, also may be part of what people's experience are later when they're saying, bring a gift of your heart. Well, if you have a gold ring or you have, a diamond, bring it to the temple because that's where God dwells. It is a sense of if you give it, then you will experience a connection. And maybe people felt they needed to have some kind of physical symbol. However, it's problematic. And I would rather go to Malbim where he says, let them make me a sanctuary that I might dwell among or within them. In them, the people, not in it, the sanctuary. We are each to build a sanctuary, a tabernacle in our own heart for God to dwell. So that goes back. Malbim in the 13th century is agreeing with Eitz Chaim that Brad read a few minutes ago about the indwelling aspect of God. And how do we see that sense of the spiritual nature in what this Mishkan is, to provide a sense that each human being will be connected on a deep level. Now, some of you may still have the Women's Torah commentary, and I'm going to go back to it for a focus on exactly this. It's page 464 in the green Women's Commentary. And it would be the this third paragraph in that I may dwell among them. Is anybody seeing that to read it? Somebody have it? Page 468. That I may dwell among them. The third italicized section down. Great. Mara.
Read from that I may dwell among them.
Yes.
The two key Hebrew words, Vishanti and Mishkan, are related linguistically to the feminine noun Shekhinah. The rabbis use that term for the indwelling and intimately felt presence of God, believing that the Shekhinah was present in the tabernacle and later in the temple in Jerusalem. According to the Talmud, the Shekhinah also accompanied Israel into exile and becomes manifest during communal worship and moments of individual need. As Sharon Faye Corin explains, medieval Jewish mysticism often represented the Shekhinah as a female aspect of God. The Shekhinah mediated between heaven and earth and served as the passive eye or door through which a mystic could achieve divine vision. The mystics believed that sexual relations between the Shekhinah and a male aspect of the divine brought about cosmic harmony. Similarly, intercourse between a male mystic and his wife on earth, especially on Shabbat night, could foster both divine and mystical union. Some contemporary Jewish feminists have reclaimed the symbol of the Shekhinah to counter what they perceive to be the patriarchal bias of Jewish theology. They have reinterpreted mystical themes and emphasized the symbol of the feminine, Shekhinah, in innovative new liturgies.
Thank you. So you see, this notion of indwelling is pretty old. I mean, if it's found in Babylonian Talmud, Parshat Megillah, it's in our tradition that there's an indwelling presence of God. And then later, probably 12th century, Kabbalists took that up as the Shekhinah, the feminine presence. So that notion of indwelling, of God within, God who manifests from within our hearts, who goes with us where we go, who, in a sense, walks with us, is an ancient concept of the Mishkan, meaning V'shachanti bitocham, that I, God, will live inside the people. And that the notion of God as an intimate spiritual presence is quite, quite something in terms of how we take God's presence on in our life. Now, when we build a synagogue today, I sometimes wish we could go back to the simpler version. Can we gather in a room and be together? Can we gather outside? Can we be by the beach? Can we be in the mountains as a community and have that sense of God's presence, where I often experience it in terms of the wind and feeling the air and the wind and as an element of God's presence, because you can breathe it in and you have a sense of God within. So this debate in our tradition, is the Mishkan the place where God dwells, or is it the place where God dwells within us, is a pretty old tradition. And the question really becomes, how do you carry God's presence? Do you? In what ways do you manifest it? Other thoughts or comments? Suzanne.
Rabbi, it's so incredibly personal. It is so personal. I have trouble, but I'm almost glad about it, separating the history of our people historically and all of the hardships and all of the traveling and everything that happened centuries ago. It's very separate from what I feel now about being Jewish. And I have to say, for me personally, when I go to visit my family in in Seattle, they don't have a synagogue. They share a church. And it feels the same to me in my heart as when I'm at the resident campus. My heart feels the same. It's like, it's beautiful at the resident campus. The church is beautiful also. We're all there for the same reason. And that's it.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Yes, so the environment and the aesthetic has an impact on our awareness of bringing God in. And how does it work? Some people will find the resident campus so modern and prefer the Wilshire Boulevard Temple campus with the, sort of the art and architecture of the 1920s. Other people would prefer what was Campus Kramer's Beit Knesset, which was an outside sanctuary that looked onto a field of trees. And that sense of the question is not where does God need a home, it's where do I, as a spiritual person, experience God's presence. So I think that is part of what we're navigating. I'm conscious of the time, and I want to thank you. I want to have time for prayers for healing. As we said, when we did the prayer for study, I want to incorporate specific prayers, that we have for people who are in need of healing, including Rabbi Stanley David's, and comfort. And are there any other names you'd like to mention for prayer for healing?
No, Castanedis.
Yes, and I will look at the chat as well. Okay.
I would mention Sherry Diva Center to little children.
Yes. This is for healing, and then
For
we'll do the
healing.
prayer for the Captives and Kaddish.
All right.
To Howard. So may those who are in need of healing be surrounded with acceptance and hope and inspiration of their medical team to move them towards healing. Amen. Prayer for captives, and we're so conscious of this. Our God be a refuge for the oppressed, a refuge in times of trouble. That's from Psalms 9:10. Strengthen their spirit and bring them our prayers that they be protected from all harm. Implant understanding in the heart of the enemy that they might return the captives in wholeness of body and spirit. Grant wisdom to the Israeli Defense Forces that they might secure freedom for the captives without loss of life. Strength of spirit and courage of heart to all the sons and daughters of Abraham and Sarah to release the bonds of captivity and allow us all to live in freedom. They shall call upon me, and I will answer them. I will be with them in distress. I will rescue them and honor them. And together we say, Amen. May they come home in strength and health.
Right.
Um, I just want to make sure I have my Siddur here. Oh,
Excuse me.
Kaddish.
Excuse me.
So
I thank you for the Zoom. I thank you for Zoom, so I am able to participate. I can't drive anymore, and I'm slightly disabled. My legs are not good, so Zoom is a good thing for me because I'm physically and sometimes mentally disabled, and I can't get. The doctor says no driving for you forever because I can cause accidents. So this is the safe place for me to engage in worship and study. I thank you very much for the Zoom.
thank you. So I want to have Kaddish, and we can sit where we are, where we're comfortable and healthy and calm. Our tradition, if people like to stand, you may. If you don't want to, be where you are comfort. This is the Kaddish list for this week. Those who passed away during the past month. Does anybody want to call someone's name out who has died in the last 7 days? Anybody who has passed away in the last month? These are the names I have: Jasmine Avraham Bina, Marty Davidge, Stan Inkles, Donald Lowe's, Karen Rund, Rabbi Micah Ellenson, Oded Leifshitz, Ariel Kafir, and Shiri Bibas. Are there other names you'd like to mention who've died in the last 30 days? We also take those who've died defending the United States and the state of Israel into our hearts. These are the yard sites that have occurred in the past week. Jack Armo, Leah Bank, Sidney Bankerman, Jacob Bender, Helen Burnast, Jerry Bernstein, Lawrence Block, Alma Bogia, Carol Ann Brand, Ingrid Braslow, Martin Brown, James Larry Carson, Sheila Hoffman Carson, David Chorna, Stella Codd, Richard Gary Cooper, Kevin Davis, Sam Davis, Herbert Ehrlich, Marion Eisenbaum, Gerald William Elkins, Horatio Effelbaum, Hugh Fate, Lawrence Feinstein, Rabbi Harvey Fields, Doris Fink, Irving Fink, Lucas Simon Foster, Burton Friedman, Maurice Gersh, Sidney Goldberg, Stanley Goldklang, Charlotte Goldsmith, Bram Goldsmith, Ann Gordorsky, Jack Goodman, Muriel Goodman, Irving Gozonsky, Shirley Green, Lionel Harrison, Rabbi Yehuda Heskiloff, Ether Hofer, Sybil Hyman, Sharon Levy Jaffe, Robert Carrots, Isabel Klein, Helen Klein, Martin Kosingberg, Yetta Krull, Joseph Kurtzman, Elizabeth Kurtznia, Douglas Lamb, Rose Levin, Thelma Levin, Dorothy Levin, Jean Lieber, Olive Lipkin, Samuel Lipkin, Nicholas Lubin, Sherry Malone, Stan Margolis, Michael Melvain, Merle Holly Modell, Jack Nagger, Amin Nahai, Raymond Marshall Norton, Irving Ostro, Annette Poland, Robert Powell, Eudice Pulgar, Walter Reed, Arpad Rev, Susan Richmond, Victoria Robin, Harry Rosenbaum, Irving Rothenberg, Marcella Eilis Rothman, Marcy Rothman, Joyce Rubenstein, Saul Root, Frida Sandrich, Jane Schreiber, Barbara Serban, Isaac Silver, William Sin, Leo Serrata, Nathan Solomon, Nathan Spielberg, Sandra Stein, Sam Steinberg, Jeffrey Stern, Richard Sutkin, Stephen Tech, Linda Tepper, Bell Tuck, Mina Tuller, Gordon Waller, David Warren, Helene Groman Weiss, Milton Weiss, Mitchell Witzenhausen, Edith Wixon, Lillian Verst, Georgette Yosefir, Nancy Zeman. Are there additional names to add to the Kaddish list? We'd like to acknowledge those who died defending the state of Israel and all those who have no one to recite Kaddish for them. Please join me. Yit Gadal, Yit Gadal,
Kadash, Shemay Rabbah,
Bialman, Yibrach, Hirutei, Yamlich, Malchutei, V'chayachom,
On
Yomech,
Uvechayet Ave Israel, B'Hagala Uvizman Pariv Vimru,
Amen.
Yehei
Shmei
Rabba,
Rabbah Mavarach,
Le'olach,
Le'olam
Le'olam,
L'Omei
Amen. Barak,
Yibrak Ishtabach, Galar V'Yitramach, V'Yitadar V'Yitaler V'Yitalah, Shmei Kedusha Urichu, Elam B'Kavta B'Shirata, Tushuvata V'Ne'amata, Da'amiran V'Yamah V'Yimru, Amen.
Amen. Yehei
Shalom Rabba Min Shemaya, V'Chaim Aleinu
V'Yalkol
Amen.
Amen.
Shalom.
Shalom.
Kuyas.
Shalom.
Aleinu
Aleinu
V'Yalkol
Yisrael.
Amen.
Amen.
May peace be found in the high heavens, in our world, and in our hearts. Shabbat Shalom. Amen.
Shabbat
Shabbat
Shalom.
Shalom. Thank you,
Rabbi.
Thank you
Rabbi.
very much.
Thanks so much.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Okay, hi, Mer.
Hi,
Hi.
here for part of it.
Hi, Howard. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Eric, thank you.
Great to see you.
I will try to use different Tanakh and maybe prepare a sheet that you can see my outline.
Thank you very much. This was wonderful.
Thank you very much. I'm in Florida now. I'm a snowbird down in Florida, but I just can't drive anymore. It's too treacherous for me and the other victims on the road. So I ceased driving because of doctor's orders.